Hi, Mas. How are you doing today?
Chad, I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Now, you have been recommended for me to have an interesting chat with because you've got a wonderful background in helping
Yes.
people through healing, and you've got a fascinating story to tell about how that all came about. So, before we have a look at that, can you just share with us what happened before you became a healer?
Sure. Well, let's go back quite a long time ago, back in maybe late teens, early 20s. I was really, I was always intuitive, but I was always trying to find, say, that one answer, that one, say, equation that describes all life, what was that key? And I went through the religious books, I studied the great religions. I studied some spirituality. I studied, well, that didn't really do it for me. So I went into, say, motivational books,
Can I just ask you
success books.
what made you want to look for that one equation in the first place?
I always had a desire to understand, say, life at a deeper level. I don't know what it was. When other kids were partying, and so on. I mean, I partied here and there. I'd end up some nights just like cuddling up with a good religious book or something. Uh, crazy stuff like that. I was just kind of drawn into that. So
Was that
maybe in
anything
a
to do with your
past,
family or where you were, what culture you are coming from or something?
um, it could be. It could be. We grew up. I was born in Afghanistan. I came here in the U.S. So, trying to maybe find myself, maybe identify who I am, just understand, say, life. Let's just say I was a very different kid,
How old were
because
you when
I
you came to the US?
about 5 years old. So very young. So which is nice because I have the culture of the family background and then the Americanized, I guess, if you want to. So
That's
I have the best of
fascinating.
both worlds.
I had
Yeah.
the same thing. I came from Pakistan when I was 4 years old
Ah,
to England, and I grew up and studied here. And
yeah.
so we already know we already had a private chat, and we know we've got some interesting common history. So it's interesting that we've
Hmm.
kind of entered into the Western world in a very similar fashion too. So carry on,
Yeah.
tell us more about the story of what happened when what you were doing, reading all these books and trying to find this equation.
Hmm. So, growing up Muslim, I read the Muslim culture, and our family is more of an advanced, culture. Our family specifically. My dad's a surgeon and a physician. He's semi-retired now. But so I was always in that mode of, say, the bigger, broader thing of, say, helping individuals. Actually, I wanted to be a doctor as I grew up, but I couldn't stand, you know. I don't think I could go in, day out, and see sick people. So I kind of transferred into, marketing, and then I ended up being a computer programmer. Um, but
That's
anyway,
so funny.
coming.
Again, my parents
Oh,
wanted me to become
really?
a doctor, and what did I end up doing? I ended up getting into computer programming. That's so
Oh,
uncanny.
so crazy. I told
Carry
you we'd
on.
get along good.
That sounds great. It's an amazing
Yeah.
synchronicity.
Yeah,
Coincidence.
when I come to the UK, we'll definitely have to do coffee at least, or lunch or dinner or something. So,
Yeah.
um, anyway, I studied all those, philosophical books, the motivational books and all that. But still, there was just that one key. We had a lot of, say, wealthy family friends, and I was looking at them, and I'm going, well, their life isn't all that fantastic either. They have a lot of problems. Right? They have a lot of issues, and that's what we look for. A lot of us think that if we had the money, then our life would be, say, perfect, and it's really not. Or if we had this, let's just say, call it X, then our life is going to be perfect, and it's not. So, what really opened me up to understanding that, the grandness of life, or that equation, really starts with something internal, and that's when I had my first near-death experience. I used to I used to unload rail cars as a warehouse job during college. So in that experience, I had my jaws crushed. They have these moving walls inside the rail cars.
Mhm.
I got, the wall was stuck, so I offered to climb up, and then this wall, my teammates were pulling from underneath, and this wall just slid on its rails and then crushed my jaws. And the fascinating part, I know it sounds weird, might be painful or scary, but I was truly, truly fascinated by it because that was the first time. Jazz, that I pulled away from my body. Right? So just imagine you're like looking at a mirror and you're just pulling away, floating away. And then I realized it's like, wait a second, I'm over there, but what am I doing over here? Because my consciousness came over here. And then I realized it's like, wow, I had died, I had crossed over. And again, you think it was scary or anything. It wasn't. It was the most expansive, most beautiful experience they can ever have. So I realized that I'm just a whole complete universe within myself. I have so much power, so much abilities. And then I look at my, say, physical self that we, choose to believe in. And then you start to understand that, the physicalness of this world is just accumulation of what we know, what our experiences are, right? What our thoughts are, what comes from family dynamics, or if you want to call it previous lifetimes, whatever it is, right? It's just an accumulation of that. Very, very limited. And I would say about 1% of your true, say, essence. The other 99% is at spirit level, or what I call your blueprint level. Um, I ascended, to finish that up, I ascended past that. I went, and then I went into this tunnel of light. And that's where it really got interesting. That's where I started to say, notice the details of that tunnel of light. That you hear a lot of times your life flashes through. Your life doesn't really flash through. We just don't have that mental, say, capacity or to really understand, because we live. For me, for example, I lived 22 years in a matter of a second. So how can time get warped to live 22 years in a matter of a second, right? So I was starting to understand, it's like, wow, time is not a constant, it's really a variable in that space. Anyway,
It doesn't pass at a fixed rate. It's something that shifts with your consciousness. I'm just curious though, when this
yes.
happened, your
Mhm.
colleagues that you were working with at the time, how did they what happened with them? How did they deal with what was happening with you?
They were actually, I met one of the individuals that was working with me back then, just like about 4 or 5 months ago, and he goes, "That was the scariest thing that they've ever gone through, because they saw me just like dangling from my head, and they didn't know what to do. They were trying to push the door back, and then that's where I fell on the floor, and then I came back." It was like, it's not your time yet. And then I just got pushed back, and then I got, you know,
So in
I
that
regained
tiny
consciousness.
in that tiny period, is that the tiny period within which time expanded out from a few seconds to
Yes.
years?
Yes, you live your whole life through. You understand that your life is not made of any mistakes, even the mistakes that you think you've made. And there's no, I wish I could have, I wish I should have, or darn, I should have done that. There's nothing like that. It's just beauty and grace. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. That doesn't mean that you're supposed to go suffer from where you are. It just means that, wherever you are is really a chance for you to expand and grow.
I mean, that's an important thing to recognize.
Yes.
When I've met a lot of
Yes.
people, I've said that one of the most important thing for you to be doing is to actually start removing what I call unnecessary challenges in your life.
Yes.
Now,
That is true.
I said there are necessary challenges, and it's
Yes.
important to go through them.
Yes.
Why let stuff coming in which is not to do with what you're meant to be learning while you're here?
True.
Find the stuff that you're meant to learn and get on with that.
Right.
And no matter how
True.
hard it is, even if it is challenging.
Hmm.
So as a consequence of that experience, what happened
Hmm.
to you?
After that, well, my jaws were wired shut for a few months,
Mhm.
so I just had to, sip food through a straw. But Jazz, it was really a fantastic experience. It was one of the most beautiful experiences, because I could see the world in 3D, much more brilliant. I could start to see, say, the fabric of how things are put together. I started to understand that, say, this world isn't really, say, a solid. I see it as a hologram. So I started to see, and some people do this, they started to see the resonance or frequencies, like especially if you look at trees or plants, and it was a lot easier for me to say, they're not really there, you know. And this kind of gets to the point where sometimes you see monks, where they can blend into, say, the cave walls and so on. They can put, their hand imprint and stuff. Obviously, I couldn't get to that point, but
Did you have a
that's
sense of
the
that
world.
experience though while you were in that few seconds where you were out? Did you in that other realm that you were in?
Hmm.
Can you just go back a little bit and describe what happened there in terms
Sure.
of what experiences you had? Because I don't think we really went into that enough.
Sure. Again, from what I understand is, a lot of people who've had a near-death experience, they say they see the tunnel of light. So there's different layers of the tunnel, and this is what makes me different. And I'll tell you what makes me different in the second near-death experience. But the introductory layer, or that opening entry, is where, say, your loved ones are available. They guide you in. I bypassed that. I went into the layer maybe halfway through again, where you kind of review your life. And in that space, it's just a space of grandness. There is no time value. There is no, say, distance value. You just kind of see, you just kind of are, say, the experience that you're, say, experiencing. And it's always filled with grace. It's always filled with beauty. There is no doubt in your mind. It's just solid completeness that you are.
If there's no time, then how do you make sense of things moving or passing or transforming when if there's no time, then surely everything should be still, shouldn't it be static?
No. Let's just say that there's, say, a time variable that you're connected to in the physical world,
Hmm.
okay, from what I'm understanding. But at the spirit world, you can control the time or you can dictate the time. So,
I see.
say, around you, you sense the grandness, right? You sense the grandness and the spaciousness of, and again, it feels like I was there for I don't know how long, but years and years. Um, but as, say, you focus on your life history, right? Because it's a time value, uh, and it's not a variable; it's a constant. I mean, time is, say, a constant, and we can get into the details of time maybe a little later in this interview. But so it brings you focused into, say, a time constant where you can still see your time but in a very different frame rate, if you will.
Mhm.
Because again, 22 years compressed in, say, a second or 2 seconds worth of, say, physical time.
Mhm.
Obviously the frame rate has to change. But as that frame rate changes, it doesn't mean that life is sped up for you. I don't know how it all works, but you actually experience life in real time.
I see.
Um, yeah, but since your brain doesn't have the capacity to really, say, have that much data input, right? Because that's a lot of data, 22
Mhm.
years in just a flash. Your life seems to, say, bounce or skip through time, or you remember flashes of time.
So I'm just curious,
Hmm.
because as a physicist, I understand about things to do with space and time, as well
Hmm.
as consciousness and how they all relate with each other. But
Sure.
for example, if I drive a car and I hit the accelerator or the gas and I move
Right.
more meters per second, or I put the brakes on and slow down,
Right.
I'm still experiencing all the space. I'm just
Right.
changing the rate at which I'm experiencing it,
Right.
the rate at which I'm seeing the scenery, if you like.
Right.
So, is it something like that with time as well, where you can through intent control the rate at which you move through time and choose when to stop and look at the scenery, so to speak?
You actually can. Yeah, and they've actually done like studies here. Well, Einstein's theory of relativity. Where the physicists they've done this with what is it? Not electrons. Um, anyway, I forgot what it was. I think it was electrons or something maybe smaller, where they could see from the top of the mountain. By the time it got down to the bottom of the mountain, time actually, say, slowed down for those electrons. Hey, and I'm sure you've heard of examples where, like, if you have twins and one travels at the speed of light, right? And they go to a distant planet, they come back, uh, and it might be, say, 40 years in between time, and it only took them, say, uh, like two light years to go by. They only aged, maybe 2 3 years, where their other twin aged like 40 years.
Yeah, I think the example you're
those kind of
talking about
experiences out
is
there.
an atomic clock.
Yeah,
There's
the
an
atomic
atomic clock
clock.
which vibrates a very specific
Yes.
way, and it vibrates differently at the top of a mountain compared to below in terms of the
Yeah.
rate. And that's to do
Right.
with the gravitational field being slightly different and therefore altering the rate of the flow of time
Right.
relative to us. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know all the details, but in a grander scale, now you are, say, the editor of time now, at your spirit level or your truer self.
I see. Yeah, I get that. So when you're obviously
Yeah.
out of your body and
Hmm.
you're in the consciousness,
Right.
and you are not constrained by time or space anymore, or even constrained by your own consciousness, the one that's
No.
brain, then obviously you can move around in time and space. Maybe even, would it be accurate to say that you don't just move around in time and space, but you also move around in consciousness, a bigger
Uh,
consciousness?
oh, definitely. You start to see, say, the different realities that are out there for you. And that actually happened in my second near-death experience where I drowned. And this was in like 2006. I had a drowning experience. I got sucked into, say, a hole in the river. So basically a drain that feeds underground rivers and so on. And that in that experience, I ascended through the tunnel of light, right? And this is, again, this is what makes me different, like I said before, is that this time I ascended way past through the tunnel of light. Most people get stuck, and then they come back in the tunnel of light at some level. And this is, I call it the big blue space, or that heavenly blue space. So you start to know your identity. You start to sense, obviously, that there is no time and space. And it's very interesting because, when I go back to that experience, since it's not connected to time and space, it feels like it happened yesterday for me. The feelings happened yesterday for me, which is really cool. Again, sorry about that.
I've got a
In
question
that,
about that though, because you said something
sure.
important, which is you talked about space and time and this consciousness as well. Well, when we look at the world around us and we see things like cars and houses, we know that human beings' consciousness created those things.
Right.
Now, when you're in that kind of environment and there's space and time and there's consciousness, do you ever get the sense that there's something beyond all that that created all that?
Yes. Yes, exactly, and that's what I was gonna get to actually.
Okay.
So at that level, like you were saying, there's a consciousness of being conscious, I guess. So you start to know your identity. At that level, we're still, say, in human form, or your spirit identifies itself as human form. But then you get grander, and you get even. I don't know how long it took, but I experienced spirit as spirit without the, say, consciousness of human form. And then, like I said, more universes kind of opened up for me. So that intelligence, that knowledge, I've been able to, say, pull down or bring into, say, a physical knowledge where I can, say, help people transform their lives in any area of their life, because I see things as frequencies. So, and I really think that
Just a
that's
question about that though, which is
sure.
when you experience all those universes, and then you
Hmm.
come back and think that you can help people. What was it that you saw or you connected to or engaged with when you were in those connection with all
At
those other
those levels.
universes that made you
Okay.
feel that you had something to give to people when you came back here?
Sure. At the time I didn't know. It wasn't like, say, my purpose to go there, but at that level, all the knowledge that ever is, ever will be,
Mhm.
is there for you. You just know that you have, say, command or mastery of all the knowledge that ever was there for you.
So
Anything that you needed
do
or
you feel that
wanted.
it's some kind of huge database that you have had access to?
Yes, I call it the universal database, Jazz.
That's
I
obviously a
really
computer
do.
programming term.
Yes, yes. And that's what I do now. Like if somebody asks me a question, no matter, say, what field it is, I can usually, say, sense what they're asking and then tap into the universal database, and then pull down, say, the true answer, or the most valid answer for them.
I see. I really resonate with that because I work a lot with creatives and artists, and
Hmm.
often they and even scientists who are trying to
Yep.
explain very high level concepts in ordinary human terms. And I've
Right.
probably spent the last 10, 20 years learning
Hmm.
how to do that. And
Yes.
for a long time, I thought, oh, I'm just very good at articulating things. But then a friend of mine once said, you do realize that where people connect in terms of healing and psychic
Yes.
abilities, it's the same place as your imagination. Because I always used to doubt whether I really had any
Right.
kind of abilities, because I thought, oh, it's
Hmm.
just my imagination. But then if it's in the
Right.
same space as your imagination,
Hmm.
I want to ask you a question about that. If it's in the same space as your imagination, your healing abilities, and all this other abilities that you get,
Hmm.
how can you tell whether it's just you
It's
imagining
your
it or it's
imagination.
real?
Well, you start to hone it. It's the same place as your imagination, but then you have to go, say, further or deeper in that, say, tunnel or vein. So yes, it starts out with your imagination, but like I said, you got to go much, much deeper, and then you can sense, like you can, or I can, it actually starts to become, say, part of you.
What was it you
And
did
then,
that allowed you to move and traverse more and deeply into that imaginary space, beyond which obviously is all the stuff that you've been talking about, the
right,
universe database, the higher dimensions, all the other things, the powers from which end up being within.
sure. So what you're asking, did I do physically to go beyond that space or connect, or?
Yeah, what was it that you did? It could be physically, but what was the action that you took to move
Oh,
deeper into that imaginary space and go and be able to go into the stuff that's real to
sure.
you?
Sure. Yeah, it's quite interesting. So after I had, say, that near-death experience, the drowning experience, and what was amazing about that is that, I kind of got shut off or turned off just like a switch, and then I found myself about maybe 50 yards above river. I should have been, say, pulled down river, but I think through divine intervention, I was somehow saved and set on the side. But that's where my abilities of like seeing your spirit, because most people don't see spirit, they actually see the energy systems of the body that make up the physical form. I actually see your spirit, your core level programming, so to speak. But about a few months after that adventure, that experience, I started getting guided into, say, these deep meditations that would last like 4 or 5 hours long, and to me they were just maybe felt like 4 or 5 minutes long. um, and in that love, at that level, I was downloaded again with a lot of information. I went through a lot of, say, dark times. It took me about 3 or 4 years of dark times, so to speak, where I identified myself as, say, separate. So, and I call it dark times because, well, it was scary. Um, what we have to go through, that psychology, really controlling, your say emotions, your psychic, your state of balance, I guess, as you go through these layers or these worlds. But as you go through them, you start to identify or you start to pull away, and that's why it gets dark, because it's a death. That I call it a death space or a death experience. You start to pull away from who you are as human form again. You start to pull away from all that identity, and then it flips around for you. Something happens that it flips around for you, and then you start to see, say, human life or human experience from a spiritual standpoint. Most of us
Is
here,
that a different kind of identity? Is it a new identity or is it the same identity?
it's really, it's not the same identity, but maybe from a different perspective. Because most of us here, what do? We have a physical life, right? And we see it from a physical form. And then most of us, again, try to, say, connect to our spiritual, our higher being, right? But this process that I help people like transform their lives, what happens is that it flips around. You start to say spirit having a human experience. Again,
Hmm.
very different than humans having a spiritual experience. Once you see that, you see the greatness of whatever happens in your life, right? You see all the benefits of what's happening for you in
So
your
is
life.
the human part like the spirit's clothes, almost something it wears?
Right. Yes, you start to identify that you are, say, grander than, say, just the form that you are. The human, say, the human body that we are is just, well, again, it's just an identity that we've created
Does
from
that mean
spirit
then
level.
at that level the spirit can change clothes and take on a different body?
Well, if you had, say, enough consciousness, I bet you could. There's actually, and this is kind of something what I do, but maybe at a different time frame. Um, and it's happened in recent times, but back in the 1970s, 1980s, just to give you an idea of how, say, human form can change, they had a study, a psychology, I think, Journal of Psychology. I think you can find it or you can Google it. Excuse me. So they had an individual with multiple personalities. Okay, in one personality, he had diabetes. He had like high blood sugar levels. He had kidney failure, and they physically tested him. So it was a hard test. He switches over just like that into this next personality. Okay, and they test him again.
Mm-hmm.
There's no signs of high blood sugar levels. There's no sign of kidney failure, nothing like that. So what changed? I can identify that, he's basically got two spirits running one body. And when they switch like that, your human form switches. So that's an instance of, say, my abilities, but obviously not at that level. I can't help you change like that, but in a short period of time, I can transform you. So,
Well, it's
or edit
interesting.
your programming.
It's interesting that you said what you did about. I'm aware of that particular case, and for my master's degree, I studied genetics and looked at how the brain and through hormones can affect DNA and its expression and the
Right,
biophysiology of the body as well. And I
right.
just literally today, I put up a post on an interview that I did a few years ago. Somebody interviewed me on the biochemistry of healing and mind-body medicine, and
Hmm.
specifically in that, I looked at authenticity, and I said, "Do you realize that?" The nature of consciousness that you're aligned to, what you're being true to, is what your genetics will try and reproduce.
Right,
If you're
right.
not being yourself, your genetics will try and produce a body which is not you, which is not self,
True,
and may even
true,
lead to autoimmune disorders. However, as soon as you
true,
start being true to yourself, then your
true,
genetics tries to align to that, and then your immune system goes, "Oh, that is self. That's not something I
true.
have to attack." So it's
Right.
interesting what you just said, because that
Yes,
reflects what the relationship is between
yes,
perspective, consciousness, the immune
yes.
system, and even DNA and how it expresses
Hmm.
itself in our bodies. And I think that's
Right,
really
and
interesting.
yeah, and this is where, like in my case, and again, I'm not a doctor or anything like that. I don't heal anybody, but I help you, say, awaken, like you just said. You awaken your core level or your higher spirit, whatever you want to call it, your higher self. You awaken them, right? And you help, say, that's how I help you heal yourself, whatever it is, because your higher spirit is not supposed to be in lack. Your default state is, again, a grandest that I talked about, at that near death, after that near death experience, total abundance, no matter what it is, no matter how much money it is that you need to be in abundance. It doesn't matter. That gets created for you once you start to awaken, like you just said. Tumors start to disappear once people awaken. If that's not their life cycle, or if that's not true for them. Heart issues, diabetes, whatever it is, they start to disappear for you. Your relationships get better, whatever it might be. Again, if it's your truer self, it'll come back to normal.
I want to ask you a specific question, because you mentioned some things to do with other universes and time and
Yes.
space,
Hmm.
and even talked about resonances, for example.
Sure.
One of the things that you've indicated to people before, in terms of how you explain what you were experiencing, the closest thing that you came to understanding what could explain all those things was quantum physics.
Yes.
And for my astrophysics degree, my final year
Hmm.
project was studying particle physics, quantum physics, reactions at CERN. And
Hmm.
one of the things that the scientists don't look at, although they know about, is the role that consciousness plays in creating
Yes.
reality. Now,
Yes.
they know it goes on, but from a practical perspective, they're just going to work with their formulas and bash their particles and get their
Right.
physics laws written. But you're not likely to find many of those certain scientists talking about the consciousness problem.
Hmm.
They'll avoid it and just work with what's tangible and real. In your opinion, though, when you talk about quantum physics and how it
Hmm.
explains what's been happening to you,
Right.
is it about quantum physics? What features or principles were there that helped you understand what happened with you?
Oh, definitely. Even Einstein, when he was going into, say, understanding time and so on, he said that there's spooky things. I didn't know. I don't remember the exact quote, but it says spooky things start to happen.
Yeah,
Maybe,
spooky
uh,
action at a distance. Yeah.
yeah, spooky. So that's the spooky action that I guess I've gotten into. And from what I understand, Jazz, is that everything is really related to time. If there was no time, you would be completely present. Again, like trees, rocks, animals, and so on. Although they move through time, they're stuck in a present moment space. So when you're stuck in a present moment space, you are, say, completely abundant. There's just no way that you can't become abundant, right? You naturally attract abundance if you are in a lack. So what I do is, again, all based on quantum physics, because it's really the study of time. The study of time creates density, or where matter is. How it creates matter. Well, you know how a centrifuge, centrifuge creates, say, that gravity, right? As it spins around, it creates
Mhm.
density. That's the way I see, say, this reality of this world actually gets created. Anything in this reality, whether it's planetary systems, whether it's your human body, whether it's your experiences that you have, good or bad, is really, say, that gravitational pull that you have on these, say, I don't want to call it God molecules because it's already been taken, but say a God molecule or a frequency that creates, say, the heaviness or again the density or the material that we experience here.
Well, let me ask you a question about that because
Sure.
in the East, I think it was Madame Blavatsky a long time ago who said it, but
Mhm.
it's originally taken from Tibetan and Buddhist principles, which is that they said that matter is the densest form of mind. Um,
Exactly. Yes.
Now, with regards to
Beautiful.
what you just said, it's quite interesting because I for a long time tried to look at how matter gets created
Hmm.
into reality from virtual spaces, which is what people at CERN study all the time.
Right.
And they can talk about it mathematically in terms of laws and physics and things like that, but they also
Yes.
know that consciousness influences how things come into reality.
Yes.
So if that's the
Yes.
case, bearing in mind what you said, oh, it could be a particle, it could be a law, it could be a force. Is it more true to say then that actually that gravitating principle, the thing that condenses stuff into reality, is
Hmm.
actually something to do with consciousness? There's something to do
Yes.
with the state of mind that brings it in.
Yes.
Could you just
Yes.
perhaps explore that with me a little bit and say
Sure.
what you have in terms of experience of that?
Sure. From what I've seen and Jazz, from what I've been taken, say, back into, I've actually gotten, say, past the times through these, intense meditation experiences where, they were showing me, say, the timeline that's been created for us in this, say, universe or in this earthly plane. So I've gone beyond that. So I know that there is space beyond time. Um, in the Big Bang that they call it, I actually think that was, say, well, in religious terms, the original sin that they talk about, dropping from heaven into the earthly plane. Again, those are all, from my perspective, not about sin, not about being bad, but it's really about the origination of time and
So
space.
is that a movement through dimensions then? Is that what's going on?
Yes. Yes, and that's where, say, all our spirits were, say, created into a oneness. Okay, uh, at that point, we were actually, say, one, say, complete spirit, like a sphere, basically. And then each one of us wanted to have, say, different experiences, right? And that's where we, say, split off into, say, fragments or fractals, because we're all complete, right? But we're not, say, that complete. Just like a drop of ocean. I mean, that's what a fractal is, right? It
But
has all the
do you think the
properties.
reason that we need to split was just like a fractal is for it to become more refined at bigger scales and
Yes.
with more richness?
Yes, exactly. To have our own, say, identity, our own experience, because that's what we were looking for from a higher level. So as we say expanded to have our own experiences, I actually think that we created, say, the planets, the planetary systems, because without that consciousness or knowing, there would be no need to create the planets, the universal patterns that we have, the solar system, or anything like that. So we've created all this to create some form of life that we call, well, human, or any other form that gets created.
Yeah, it's the tip of the fractal.
Yes, yes,
It's the fruit at the end of the tree, and
yes,
there's a branch, there's a trunk which takes us back to a specific origin, if you will.
yes.
What would you say that origin is beyond the Big Bang? What is it? Where did it all come from?
Boy, that's a good question. Again, when I went through that blue light, that's our origin. It's just like it's just well, I guess you could just call it consciousness for lack of a better word. But
Mhm.
within that consciousness, you have, say, like an identity of who you are at spirit level.
Mhm.
Right? I wouldn't
How,
call it God.
how's it different from the consciousness that we have as an individual then?
Oh, the consciousness we have at an individual, if you want to put, say, numbers, say the consciousness that we are, because everything has a consciousness from what I see. Rocks, for example, a grain of sand, any molecular structure, anything that creates a density has a consciousness to understand that, well, okay, I'm a rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to create that rock, or to create a tree, or to create, say, birds, or
What's the
reptiles, or
difference
whatever.
though? How is in terms of consciousness, how
Mhm.
is a rock, say, different from a baby?
Rock different from a baby?
Yeah.
Oh, it's very different. Well, what happens is, I mean, we can get into that, but our human consciousness, say, is like at a 10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the consciousness that we have, say, at a grander scale, or who we truly are, is maybe at a million.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, and I'm just putting, say, random numbers to it, but that's the expanse that we are. The consciousness of a rock and a baby, well, obviously it's a lower level consciousness, but think of, say, animals. Scientists go, well, it's just instinct that, say, squirrels, they gather nuts in a springtime or in the fall,
Mm-hmm.
for the wintertime. Where does that knowledge come from? Right? They've never seen winter before. They've never experienced winter before. The parents of those squirrels don't teach them. Okay,
Well,
you know,
can I ask you a
um,
question about that? Because I
sure.
asked you what was different in terms of
Yes.
consciousness, but
Okay.
maybe what I really should be asking is actually what's the thing that connects us all together? What's the same?
Okay. So, well, so we have different levels of consciousness. The human level is at a highest level of consciousness because we're aware. We can, say, dictate, or, say, edit or distort time for us, and that's where we get distorted in experiences. So once you become more and more aware, the consciousness is really, say, the same. I've actually, say, transformed or morphed into, say, being one like a rock, where you can, like, identify with the consciousness of a rock. And you think, being a rock, it's pretty, like, boring staying there for millions of years. But once you connect at that level, you're so present, Jazz, that actually the universe, like, really opens up, and you become totally aware of, say, everything that's around you. You can, say, connect into a rock, or have the level of that consciousness. Again, the really key thing is not, say, the level of consciousness, but that when that consciousness prepares you to become, well, prepare is not a good word, but that consciousness, say, connects you to the present. And once you are so present, the consciousness actually opens up for you, and then you start to see, say, the universal data that's out there, anything that's available for you out there. Did that make sense for you?
Yeah, it seems paradoxical though, because it seems like the more you focus in, the more
Mhm.
you seem to be able to access outwards.
Yes, and where I yes. So, and by being present, everybody says, well, you have to be present, you have to be in the moment. I actually say you have to notice the details while you are in the moment, and that's where I say that your power, or your strength, comes into your physical form.
Mhm.
Your identity of being, say, spirit, comes into physical form. That's what we've lost, Jazz. You know, at the level that you are, spirit, right? To say come down into say physical density, you had to be dumbed down quite a bit. And that's a difference between us, say, and a plant or a rock, anything like that, because they don't have that consciousness.
Mhm.
They just are. They don't say have a higher consciousness. We have a higher consciousness that has created us. So again, we have to get say dumbed down. Our mission actually is to say get completely awakened so we can live at this level without being dumbed down. We can live in spirit form, or what religion calls heaven on earth,
Well,
really.
about that
Mhm.
process of waking up,
Sure.
one of the things I've started to, and this came about primarily through doing a lot of meditation and other things, which I
Mhm.
know is something you've linked to healing yourself, and we'll talk about that in a
Yes.
moment.
Yes.
Often when I've been coaching or working on healing with people, I've said the major problem they have when they're stuck in life is because they've had these moments in their lives
Mhm.
where they didn't actually unfold those moments completely. They
True.
left an incomplete moment behind, and
True.
when you got a
Time
trail of those
loops.
incomplete moments left behind, you end up with all this baggage. So
Yes.
I would say to them, your number one challenge is to complete the moment, to midwife
True. True.
the moment, not to get in
Mhm.
its way.
Right.
Like, with a baby being born, a midwife works to bring out the baby in its own natural way without getting
True.
in the way of it. I said, if you could do that with the moment,
Mhm.
you could midwife the moment and you could complete on it, and not leave it incomplete behind you, then you will have a
Yes.
full life behind you. And
Yes.
there'll be nothing that will be weighing you down from your past in terms of baggage or anything, incomplete
True.
things. So
True.
I just want to ask about that with regards to you. When you were talking about working with that moment,
Mhm.
um, what is there that you feel from the people that you've been working with? What is the thing that holds people back the most when they turn up and they say they've got this problem or that problem? What do
Right.
you find is at the core of them having that problem?
Right. Again, I totally agree with you. My terminology is called time loops. They get stuck in the moment,
Right.
and then what happens is whether it's their time loop or say a familial pattern time loop that comes through,
Hmm.
or what we call lineage or hereditary. What happens, Jazz, is that they think that it was a physical experience that they did in this lifetime most of the time to create. So what do? They try to solve it at the physical level, and it doesn't work. They think if they say edit their personality or whatever, or what they're doing to create wealth, or anything, they're going to create wealth. It doesn't matter. Say that time loop, as I call it, was created in the family lineage, right, or history. Or let me give you a really clear example. Um, let's just say relationships. Okay, say that, and again, this relationship, an abusive relationship, we'll just use an extreme one because it's easier to explain. But every other relationship is some form of this. Say a woman has been abused, right? She runs, say, frequencies of abuse. So, and they've done studies on this, by the way. So what happens is time after time after time, she gets away from, say, that relationship that was abusive. But what does she get into? She gets into, say, that relationship, that next relationship that turns out to be abusive as well. So is it, say, the men in her life? And again, you can reverse sexes. Is it the men in her life, or is it, say, the frequencies that are generating that create density that, say, attract those people that go, hey, I want to be abused, and then there's obviously some type of abuser that goes, hey, she wants to be abused. Let's get attracted. Um, so so what I do, and these are the time loops, the abuse patterns, right? They became, say, timeless, or they get stuck in time, if
So
you
do you
will.
help people break out of those time loops then?
Yes, yes,
You help them break
exactly.
out of the intention that keeps them there?
Yes. So I'm that. If in your example, I'm that. What did you say? That midwife? The
Yeah.
midwife that pulls them out of that time loop. And I can scan you. If you've had, say, situations, that have happened in, say, your family dynamics,
Mhm.
right? Um, your family dynamics are distorted, and most of us think, well, it's my issue. It's really not your issue. It's something that's happened in the family pattern.
When
I
you
can
scan
break them
people,
out of those time loops as
When you
well.
scan people, though, do you do that when they're physically present with you, or given how you are with space and time, can you do that remotely, or
Oh,
even
I
time in
can
the future?
remotely. Oh yeah, I can do it remotely. I can scan people through people. In fact, some of the best testimonials are, say, people who have, say, addictive patterns or behaviors, and their loved ones come. Usually their parents. They go, "Moss, can you work on my son because he's addicted?" So I can
Right.
scan them and work on them through them, and then their addiction patterns release. Yeah, I can scan them, see what's going on. Sure, if they're even dead or alive.
Yeah,
So.
that aspect of doing it through degrees of separation, I've often compared it
Yes.
to the internet and said, if you connect your computer to the internet, it goes to a local server, and then that
Hmm.
connects you through a bunch of other ones, and that's how you can have a phone call like the one that we're having at the moment.
Exactly.
But in a similar way, you can connect into someone else's consciousness and
Yes.
use it as a platform to jump off into another
Yes.
consciousness stream that they're connected into, and
That's
even if they're not
exactly what I
alive or
do.
dead or in this time or space.
Hmm.
So I did a series of talks a couple of years ago
Hmm.
where I asked experts in parapsychology to come and talk, and
Hmm.
we had some interesting discussions exactly about this. How is it that consciousness can reach out and affect things at a distance in the future, or even this is something I really like to ask you: is it possible for you to change something in history in the past?
In the past, yes, I do that. And the way I do it is like I can scan, say, your past and go, okay, say something happened in, early childhood. So I edit what happened in early childhood for them, but it's kind of a time ripple. What happens is
Mhm.
because what happens in early childhood changes how they feel in the present moment, right?
Mhm.
And then
Yeah, it's a
again,
cascade, a
back to,
domino-like effect.
of course. So that reality, although that experience might not change, their memories, what they say bring about in that say definition changes, and this goes beyond not just their lifetime, but again, like previous lifetimes or family lifetimes. So that ripple effect changes in the present moment, but then, like Einstein's theory of relativity, depending on where you are in the moment, in the present moment, allows you, say, future events, right? Different future events that are available for you because of where you are now in the present.
Mhm.
Right, so changing the past does change the present for you. Um, Sometimes jazz, it happens quite a bit actually. Say, the person's. Recall this one experience. The person was abused, and she was in her like 60s. She was mid 60s, and she was abused as a child from like 6 to 12 years old. So I changed that for her. I edited it for her, and then what happened? She came back to me like a few weeks after, and she goes, "Mas, I can't believe it. I'm seeing my life through a 6-year-old,
Mhm.
and then a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old." So what she was doing is, and this is basically how I changed pretty much most
So
everything.
was she rebooted effectively? She was
She
reset.
was, yeah, I deleted, just like in a video clip or a movie scene, I went back and say deleted that time frame
Mhm.
of distortion or abuse. So what she was doing was she was going back and she was creating that scene over again to re-understand it.
How do you know when it's appropriate to delete something? Because if it's linked into a person's life lessons or even soul lessons,
Mhm.
then how do you know what's okay to delete?
It's a good question. I always ask the spirit, if it's okay for me to say, one, transform or help change them. Okay.
Mhm.
And two, we think of, say, life lessons. Yes, there are life lessons, but if they're distorting you, they're not really life lessons, right?
So does that go
So,
back to what we were talking about earlier about removing only unnecessary challenges?
well, yeah, the unnecessary challenges, I mean, we can get into that deeper, is that everything becomes actually necessary challenges, or you start to see everything from a place of strength. So it's not really, say, the physical experiences that people have here. It's really about, say, what they take out of those experiences that they have. So what I do, again, I don't change the experiences that they've had. They still have that abuse, but what happens is that it doesn't bind them into that time loop or that time distortion, they actually start to awaken from that time distortion, and then that's where they grow and that's where they strengthen. To give you an example, and this was psychologists that followed these two twins, and one was a successful doctor, and they asked, after they became a successful doctor, he became a successful doctor. He goes, well, what do you attribute your success to? He goes, well, when we were growing up, my father was an alcoholic. He came home and abused us. My mother was never around. Well, what do you expect? You know, and then they interviewed his twin brother, which was actually an alcoholic, abusive, and they go, well, what attributed you to where you are? And he goes, well, what do you expect? My father was an alcoholic. He came home and just beat us all the time. My mother was never around. What do you expect? You know what I mean? So that's the difference. Again, it's the same experience, but then how we attach and how we learn, that's what makes us different. So,
well, that ties in very well with a lot of modern views on abuse and addiction, where
yes.
a lot of the modern theories are linked to what's called attachment theory, and what things we choose to attach to and detach from determine how we evolve. But this leads us quite nicely onto what I mentioned earlier about meditation and healing, because you've developed a practice which combines the two together, that through a practice of meditation you can initiate healing. Can you just share a little bit about that?
Sure. It's called meta healing. Okay. And I coined the terminology because what I was finding out is that as I've been working on people get into, say, much, much deeper states. Even if you've meditated, 10, 20 years, I can guide you into a deeper state. If you can't meditate, I guide you into a deeper state. So these meta healings is that, and we do it, through groups or individually. Again, I guide you into a nice deep meditative state where you focus in on your body, or you come into your body, and then I work on, say, your back end or admin level or blueprint level to, say, help edit you. Together we join forces. Okay, together we combine, and then that's where, say, the massive transformations or the fast transformations come through in people's lives.
Is that where they can effectively get a consciousness upgrade?
Yes, exactly. They start to awaken. Again, the important thing, Jazz, is anything that you need isn't outside of you. It's inside of you. It's really, really important. So I always focus in on the body. Most meditations, what do? We try to escape our body, right, and ascend higher. It doesn't work that way. It really doesn't work that way. Any of my meditations or meta healings that I do with people, I always guide them into their body. Their higher self or their spirit self starts coming in, integrating with their body, so they're connected 24/7 versus just that hour of meditation. And then again, once they're in that state, okay, I work on their higher consciousness or spirit level, and like do what I do, like reprogram them. If you've seen me on YouTube, you can just YouTube me, Mas Sajady. You'll see people like flip around, flop around, move over, fall, and so on like that. I do actually change how you are presented in physical form. So what that means is basically your body's a hologram, and that the frequencies that create that hologram, just like a movie projector, I can edit that. I can edit what's, say, coming out of that movie projector, or your film of life.
That links, I think, to something else that you've developed and worked on, which is, I mean, a lot of us know already about conventional intelligence of the mind, a mental intelligence, that way we logical or intuitive intelligence, or even emotional intelligence, which is something that's come up in the last few years. But you're exploring intelligence at a much higher level, aren't you, with what you've been working on with exponential intelligence? Can you just share something about that level of intelligence?
Sure. Exponential intelligence, again, I coined that terminology when I started to realize, say, like artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence is, say, humans creating some intelligence that mimics basically us, right? Okay. So exponential intelligence is really about spirits mimicking, again, our human identity, our human form. So it's really about that. that level of intelligence. So it's at a much say higher level of intelligence, like you said. So it's really spirit intelligence, or say that intelligence that comes from no time, no distance. So what I teach people, or what say how I heal people, again, comes from a level. The knowledge that I say help people with, when people ask me questions, there's no time. There's no time distortion. There's no history. The knowledge doesn't grow old. It's always present. It always works, no matter what time frame. Whether it's 2,000 years ago. By the way, I didn't develop this. It's always been around us. It's part of us, right? It's our core level programming, or our global setting. I just identified it. So this knowledge that I say instill in you, or help you awaken from, again, never grows old. It's really the fabric, or the global setting, and that's the level of intelligence. What exponential intelligence, my podcast, is really about.
It reminds me of honey, because people say honey never goes off, it never goes bad, and it's
True.
interesting. It's like kind of a honey consciousness. It never goes
I
off.
like that. I got to use that, if you don't mind. Honey.
Oh,
That's
okay.
nice. I love.
You triggered the
Honey
thought.
consciousness.
It's all yours. The sweetest consciousness you can have. Yeah, brilliant. Add this to your coffee every morning.
Yeah, that's nice.
Just to finish off today,
Mhm.
just two things. First of all,
Yes.
if there were three things that somebody could do to turn themselves around with regards to meditation, healing, and exponential intelligence,
Sure.
what would you say they would be? What were the three things, for example, that helped most of the people that have come to you? What's the three things that you keep going back to, getting
Okay.
to do, getting them to do?
Well, I can give you some things to do with or without me. Okay, that'll help you expand. Just note that I just do this faster. I'm kind of like that spiritual geek that just knows what's going on. So, first of all, is to be totally, completely aware of what you're doing. Okay, no matter where you are, people, they're taking a shower, for example, and their mind is, oh, I got to do this today. I got to do this today. No, just notice, say, the water coming down. Notice all the details of where you are. That's all your spirit wants. Your spirit starts to rejoice in that, because the spirit craves the flesh.
So you're saying
It starts to understand.
the number one thing should be to invest in presence?
Yes, and then go further than that and notice yourself, which is the next step of being present. Notice yourself being present, okay? Because that opens, say, the programming level, or that I call it the admin level of being present. That gives you the tools. Okay?
It's like a meta presence. Then it's a presence of presence.
Yes, it's the presence of presence, exactly. So I always say, notice the details of the details. Okay. Second of all is disregard your emotions. Most individuals, again, you hear books and so on like that. They go, follow your emotions, follow your heart. That's how you got, say, distorted in the first place. Disregard your emotions. Your emotions are not calibrated right. Okay, your emotions are actually running program, or running software that are distorting you, right? If you're running patterns of abuse, your emotions are going to attract patterns of abuse, because that's what it's calibrated to do. So instead of understanding or following your emotions, no, study your emotions. See where your emotions start to take you. Okay, if you are attracted, say, by somebody who is attractive to you. Okay, start to understand, why are they attractive to you? When you have been attracted to in that form, what has it gotten to you? What has it gotten for you in your past relationship? Did your past relationship turn into abuse? So again, once you start to notice those patterns of, say, emotions, then they start to, say, realign themselves, and then they actually help you go further, where you recalibrate, and then your emotions start to bring you into abundance. And then third of all, no matter where you are, don't try to get out of it. Don't try to go into your happy space. You're there for a reason. Okay, it wasn't a mistake. Okay, no matter how much you think of it as a mistake, but if you start to understand where you are, so if you're if you're angry all the time, right? Really, say, connect. Notice how your body feels. Notice how your emotions feel when you're angry. Notice what happens around you. Notice, say, your body, because there's a space that gets created around your body. Sense all those details. You'll actually start to enjoy being angry, you'll actually start to enjoy being poor or abused. I hate to say it. You really do. But once that happens, your spirit goes, oh, okay, I've had enough of this. It finds the quickest way out of it for you, and then you're not abused or you're not poor anymore.
Are you saying then that one of the things that's really important is, and this links to something else that I came across a few years ago,
Hmm.
which is that people used to say, you know, you've got to have willpower to do things, but if you run out of willpower, a lot of people used to think that was a bad thing, but I discovered actually the opposite. When you
Right.
apply yourself fully and you use all of your will, far from running out, the universe
Hmm.
then goes and looks at you and goes, "Well, you're really good because you use up everything I gave you, and you didn't waste any of
Exactly.
it. So you know what? I'm gonna give you more." And you end
True.
up with more power. And with
Yes.
regards to what you just said, you know, it seems if you use up all the experience that you've been given rather than just discard it,
Yes.
then the universe will go, okay, you're done with that, right? Well, let's bring on the next.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, I get that.
Exactly.
Right.
And it gives you, and then once you realize it, the universe gives you more, but then it unravels, say, the patterns that have been dictating your life course, and then you transform a lot easier.
So it gives you the resources, it gives you the experience, but
Exactly.
you got to clear your backlog. You know?
Oh, definitely.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, that links closely to what I was saying before about midwifing the moment and not having
Yep.
incomplete moments, a wake of incomplete moments behind you.
That's where you
Um,
get the incomplete moments. People try to run away from their
right.
moments, right?
Yeah, it's good that
Yeah.
you know, we've both come to the same conclusion about
Yes.
why people have problems that they do, and it indicates that
Yes.
there is this universal intelligence that we all have access to. You've obviously accessed it your way, I've accessed it mine, but we've both
Of
come to the
course.
same place.
Of course.
And I used to describe it in a very particular way. I said, you know, it's like I had this metaphor of a house of
Hmm.
healing, and I said, look, there's lots of different ways in. But whether you come in through the back window, whether you're going through the front door, once you're in the living room, you're in the living room. Everybody
You're in
sees
the
the
living
same
room.
thing. You know, it
Everybody's,
doesn't matter
yes,
which room you
exactly.
pick in, you're going to end up seeing the same thing inside.
Yes,
And
that
it's
is so
interesting
true.
that we both have found very similar encounters in that respect.
Hmm.
Just to finish up, the things that we talked about, the meditation, healing, the
Hmm.
exponential intelligence, and how you work with people to, you know, get rid of things that are getting in the way of where they need to, you know, become right now in the future.
Right.
You're coming to London in the next few weeks. Can you just
Yes.
share a little bit about the dates that you're coming and where you're going to be and what kind of things you're going to do?
Sure. I'll be there actually this next week, the 27th, through May 2nd, I believe. The
27th of
exact date.
April to May the
April
2nd.
27th. Yes, I'll be in the UK. The healthy, what is it? The Life Expo
Mm-hmm.
that's going on in the UK. Is it the Life Expo or something? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Mind
I don't
Body,
have the.
probably Mind Body
Yeah,
Spirit, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Mind Body Spirit Expo. I'll be doing there. I'll be at the. I'll have a lot of say talks that I'll be doing
Mm-hmm.
outside of the Mind Body Expo. The best thing to do if you go to my website, massajady.com, it
Mm-hmm.
gives you the exact times, the exact locations, and so on, because I'm going to be doing a lot. I'll be doing a lot of, say, presentations in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of different areas around the UK. So, again, it'll give you all the times. Specifics and so on that you can join me. We'll do in that. It's not just me lecturing and going, "Hey, this will change your life." A lot of individuals actually their lives do get transformed within the time or within the workshop because it is a workshop. We do the meta healings where I start to actually work on individuals, whether in group settings or even individually, and you get to see that transformation happen right before your eyes. Again, there's it's not like you have to wait a month or you have to do certain things. If you're in that event, you will start to see, say, the differences, or you start to notice what's happening for you. So,
That's great to hear. Well,
mhm,
just one last thing before we close
sure.
up. Um, Looking back over everything you've done,
Yes.
um, is there something that you feel is still something you're curious about that you not necessarily not figured out or anything, but it's
Mhm.
just still something that keeps pulling you towards it?
Uh, sure. You know, and this is what happens, you know, and I'm getting like faster and faster, but in the beginning, you know, when I first got my abilities or honed them, it took me about an hour and a half to do what I do now in 5 minutes,
Hmm.
okay, for individuals. You know, I was getting more into, say, like instantaneous healing and so on like that. You know, how can you, say, transform? How can you bypass, say, some of the pain that people like go through as they transform? You know what I mean? Can we change things just like that?
So you're
And
talking
then
about things like what people often talk about in terms of like detox symptoms, whether it's emotional or
detox
spiritual or
symptoms.
whatever
Yes.
otherwise. Hmm.
Yes. So, you know, like transforming people much faster, you know,
Hmm.
without, say, the detox. And maybe, you know, maybe they need that detox because it's a place of learning, like you were explaining, you know, those experiences that we need to, say, expand and grow from. And then actually like levitating, if you can start to control, you know, the frequencies the way that I do, I actually believe, you know, things like levitating or you know, bypassing time here and there would be very interesting to do.
I think that's
But
possible from my experience. I mean, my first degree, as
yeah,
I said before, was in astrophysics, but one of the
ah,
first things I did was I looked into the possibility of something unusual about the universe, which was that
mm,
scientists say that 99% of the universe is not visible to us through our
yes,
instruments.
I
We only
totally
see the
agree.
1%. And
Yes.
a scientist back in the 90s, and this is around the same time I started thinking about it, they linked gravity,
Mm,
the thing that holds the whole universe together, to consciousness. They said gravity acting on the
yes.
brain gives rise to consciousness, our thoughts and feelings.
Yes.
Now, at the
Mm,
same time, I propose, and there was a big article about this in the Times in London,
mm,
and 2/3 of the article was about what this guy was saying about gravity acting on the brain,
mm,
giving rise to our thoughts and feelings, and a third of it was an article about me
ah,
talking about the reverse, which is actually our thoughts and feelings through our intentions and perceptions through our brain can
mm,
actually influence gravity and space and
yes.
time. So the brain is a
That's exactly.
medium
That's
through which
totally agree with you.
gravity, we go through an exchange
Hmm.
with space and time and gravity.
Right.
So it's
Yes.
possible with the right focus to alter
Yes.
gravity to the degree where we could end up levitating or even traversing across time and space,
Of
just in the way that
course.
you've been talking about. So it's
Hmm.
perfectly possible, I believe. It's perfectly possible.
Yeah, I believe that too. You know, in you know, in this dimension, you know, there's actually four dimensions. You know, you got the X, Y, Z, the three dimensions, and then we have that space-time dimension, which kind of tells you exactly where you are, right? And then that kind of tells you, say, the combined dream state that we have, like a building looks the same and so on, like that. So if we can kind of edit that coordinate of space-time, I believe you could actually say like levitate. So.
You could warp
Um,
your space-time
yeah, you could
continuum and
warp. Yeah, you can edit the coordinates and just think that you're a little higher,
mhm.
you know, than actual.
Yeah, I see
Yeah,
what you mean. Okay,
yeah.
well, maybe if people come to see you in London, they'll get a chance to
I'll
see
be
some of
levitating.
that.
No,
Well, I'm
no,
sure you'll
that's
give them a good lift, their spirit,
yes.
if not anything
Spirit wise,
else.
spirit wise, yes. Feeding the spirit is very, very important. So,
Well, it's been great talking to you, and I look
thank
forward
you.
to you coming over to the UK. And
Yes,
I'll certainly be telling everybody about what you do, and I hope that you'll get lots of people come over and you get a chance to transform their lives.
thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
It's been
Take
great
care.
talking to you. Take care,
Thank
Maz.
you. You
Bye.
too. Bye bye.